Whether you're running a modern front end with dynamic assets or a deep product catalog, resource hints can help users see content faster. Today, I'm here with Joe Yoo, Delivery Engineer at Harper, to demonstrate the difference Preload and Preconnect can have on your load times. Let's kick off the demo. Joe, what are the setups we're comparing today?
Thanks, Alex. So today we're going to be comparing preload and preconnect. The first setup we're going to be doing is for preload. It's a pretty simple. This first web page is pretty simple. We're going to be loading an HTML document, and let me just show you the code here. What that's going to be doing is that's going to be loading a JavaScript file. That JavaScript file, which happens to be right here, is then going to load an image. So HTML document, JavaScript file, and then the image file. So
Awesome.
as I just did that right here, and you can see that it takes about a second to load the HTML document. After that HTML document is loaded, it then calls loads the JavaScript file here, which takes about a second. And then finally, that loads the CSS file, and that takes about a second. So with preloading, what we can do on the client side right here is we can put this link tag with preload, which is going to tell the browser we're going to be expecting this image that's going to be loaded by the JavaScript file. Instead of waiting a second, let's just load it now. And these are very useful, especially for things that contribute to LCP, which this directly does. So let's run that. Preload. So as
you can see the difference.
Yep, the difference here is that this background image and the JavaScript file load at the same time right after the HTML. That saves, in this case, because I set it to be artificially a second, it saves a second, but we're saving however long that JavaScript file takes to load. And you add that up and you get a pretty decent savings.
So that would be pretty variable based on how much network is between the client and the server?
Yes.
Okay.
Because we're basically we are saving on loading dependent files. But if you know which files that file that you're loading is going to load, a good optimization in this case would be to just load it at the same time.
Yeah, makes sense.
But we can do better with what are called early hints, which are basically preload or preconnect, but coming from the server side. So what we can do here, the HTML document is actually going to be the same as the no preload one, just the basic example. But the only difference is that right here, we send, this is the beginning of what the server will send. Right here, we send a 103 header status code, which indicates to the client that we're going to be sending early hints. And what are early hints? Early hints are the browser hints, just like the link tags we did for preload. But instead, here we're telling it that we want it to preload the image, the background image, and then preload the JavaScript file as well. Before we were actually just preloading the background image because the JavaScript file would load by itself anyway. But here we're saying just do both of them, and then let's see what we can do from here. So you'll see here now that as before, it took about a second to load the HTML file. Then something interesting happens here. You'll see that it doesn't actually say a second for each of these. It says, you'll see that it's 394, 174. That's actually telling us now that it actually started requesting about right here, because we know that it takes a second for the both of these files to actually load. So we basically saved whatever this time was to load for the actual HTML document to come in, and started just loading these the JavaScript image files ahead of time. So in this artificial example, we've then again saved about 1 second from the client side preload, and then 2 seconds from the no preload.
Awesome. And just to be clear here, you're adding an artificial second in here to kind of replicate real world scenarios. Is that
Yes.
right?
Sorry,
Okay.
I left that part out. But every one of these requests that hit a server, I've just artificially set it to be a 1 second, 1 second delay. It's just easier to kind of look at the bigger one, the
Yeah.
bigger waterfall things. So let's move over to Preconnect now. Preconnect, it's useful for when you don't necessarily know what you're going to be loading, but you know where it's going to be coming from. So in this case, well, in this case we do know where it's coming from, but if you'll imagine with me, we're going to be loading this the same JavaScript file, or just named differently, but it's also going to be this time living on a different host. So it's going to be living on this Joe PR render, blah, blah, blah. But it's going to be this CDN loader JS on that. And then what that's going to be, that's right over here on the bottom over here. What that's going to be doing is going to be loading that same image, but on a different host. This one says forward PR, no relation. But we're working with 2 third-party servers that have these files, but same functionality as our no preload example. So if we run this, you'll now see that there are these extra little different colors here for the connection, this SSL initial connection DNS lookup. What's happening here is that your browser has to, when it interacts with a new host, it has to establish that connection. Things like DNS lookup and SSL. And, that could be 100 plus, couple hundred milliseconds. So what Preconnect will do is this. Let me just show you right here first. What we can do here is same format as the preload tag, but we'll just use Preconnect here. And in this case, it's going to be the host as opposed to that exact resource path, because again, this is, we don't necessarily know in this example that it's going to be that exact resource. So this is good for fonts, anything where there's a kind of, dynamic path that is determined by, I guess, media queries, just runtime checks. But same thing as no preconnect, calls this host, and then that CDN calls another host. So let's run that. So because this, let me just run this, sorry. Because I'm on the same window here, it's going to save those, cache those connections. So what I've done here is just pre-called that request. If you'll remember that this over here, this green, orange, and purple, that's the connection that's the time it takes to actually establish the connection to these origins. This one's the Joe PR render, and this one's forward. This is the JavaScript image, and then this one's the image. For the no pre-connect, it took this time over here, about this time, to establish the connection to those hosts. When we use pre-connect to pre-connect to those, for the image over here, you'll notice that we don't have it over here anymore. It's over here. So just like Preload, we started connecting to those 2 hosts immediately as soon as we get that HTML document, which is where that link tag resides. So the browser can actually see it. But then again, and once again, early hints, we can do it even earlier. So the code is the same as the no preconnect, but what we'll do is, just like here, we'll send them as early hints headers. What that does is then moves them, instead of over here, where the request for the initial HTML document lives. So this is us establishing a connection to the actual HTML server where we're serving the page. Then right when that happens, the server sends us that 103 header, tells us start pre-connecting to these two hosts where the JavaScript and image file live, um, and do that as soon as possible. And that happens within 1 to 200 milliseconds. So we're effectively saving this initial connection time. We're saving it from versus client pre-connect. We're saving it. We're saving
Hmm.
the one right here, and versus the no pre-connect, we're actually saving both of these.
Okay. So it seems like for each time we're using Preconnect, we're saving around 150 to 200 milliseconds for each kind of connection that is needed there. And then it seems like the probably best strategy here is early hints all the time. As whenever you can send an early hint, send that early hint. But if you can send an early hint with a preload, that's when you really get those speed benefits. And a pre-connect is just kind of the second best if you're not sure what that resource is going to be.
Yeah,
Is that
I
fair?
think that's pretty much it. But there is a drawback to just kind of pre-connecting or preloading everything.
Hmm.
As always, you want to see, well, the first thing is you got to know what your critical resources are that contribute to that initial page load, because that's what we want to tackle. So, um, because too many connections, too many requests, they could actually be harmful to your initial page
Hmm.
load. In the general case, the earlier the better, right? And especially
Hmm.
when you
Yeah.
know. But yeah, it could, even just with pre-connect, a couple hundred milliseconds is not small, especially when you're talking about, perceived kind of page loading, um, where it really is a matter of 100, millisecond.
Yeah, I've seen stats from e-commerce where it's every 100 milliseconds in delay adds like it takes 7% off the conversion rate for those people coming in. So there's a huge impact that can have, especially for larger organizations. Well, thank you so much for breaking this down for us. This is a great view of what resource hints can do. Thank you so much, Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Alex.
Have a good day.
You too.